Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast, where we celebrate filmmaking, storytelling and cinema across the island of Ireland. So this episode was recorded live at the Capital Irish Film Festival, presented annually by Solas Nua in Washington, DC. I caught up with Nuala O'Connor, whose feature documentary In Time chronicles the enigmatic innovator Dónal Lunny. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
You're very welcome.
We're delighted to have you here where you're celebrating a wonderful film. But I was wondering to talk a little bit about your career first. So, yeah. What brought you, so you were in broadcast and TV and radio. What even brought you to that sphere first?
I think actually it goes back further than that. When I was in university, I was involved in a lot of traditional music events, and because I'm so old, I came in at the beginning of a lot of things. So some friends of mine, when we were all in Trinity, we started a festival there, a traditional music festival in Trinity called Colleacht na Tríonóide, which is kind of brought traditional music into the college, I think for the first time ever in a kind of a festival format.
Yeah.
And then I got involved in the Dublin Folk Festival, which was revived there a few years ago as well. And then I was involved in the Project Arts Theatre on the music events strand. This was all now running alongside supposed work and being a student and all the rest of it, but mainly I devoted myself to all those kind of activities, much to my parents' dismay. But in fact, it didn't turn out too badly. So just when I was looking for work, RTE Radio 2 FM, a new channel, was set up, and a college friend got a job there as a radio producer, and they had a kind of a features program which they hadn't kind of planned for, and he needed a researcher, and he asked me would I do it, and that was it. I went in and I basically never left media one way or another after that. So I ended up as a radio producer. I ended up on the Gay Byrne Show, which was a big radio show at the time, and I got to do a lot of different kind of work on that, and that's where I learned my trade basically. Then I went into television, became a television researcher, and then my husband and I, Philip King, we set up our own independent television company, and we were both interested. He was a musician and a singer and a broadcaster also, and so all those things came together, and what we wanted to do was music programming, and we were incredibly lucky that the first thing we did get commissioned to do was a series for BBC and RTE called Bringing It All Back Home, which was just, as somebody said to me, like being paid to eat ice cream, you know. It was a documentary series, 6-part, on the journey of Irish music to America.
Wow. And in terms of, kind of merging those loves and your passion and, your understanding of the music industry and artists, was there any moment where, you were kind of veering off course? So that was a really cool opportunity, but, where you kind of could have gotten sucked into more of a day job, or, being working on programs that were helpful in terms of honing your craft, maybe storytelling, but maybe not in the area specifically that you wanted?
Oh yeah, I'd say before I left RTE that was the case, because we were, that program, particularly the last one I worked on in RTE, was a massive, it was like working on a newspaper or something. There were, I think, 7 producers, 3 researchers, switchboard going all more, from when we went on air, really. So it could be anything. You could be doing anything. Like one of the jobs I was sent to do had nothing to do with anything I was ever interested in, in my working life, was to go out with another producer and buy contaminated pharmaceutical products for veterinary use in marts in Ireland, and then bring them back to the studio and get a vet to say what they all were, and that caused absolute mayhem in the butcher shops of Ireland after that programme went out. So that was like, it was great to do, but it had nothing to do with anything that I ever did again, I couldn't say that was honing any particular craft.
I suppose, that's it. The research, maybe, the planning, the
one thing that I did learn on that programme that has always stood to me is kind of broadly called research. But on that programme, because there was so much content coming through, if you were interviewing somebody, or if Gay was interviewing somebody, like a big feature interview, we were sent out to do the interview before the interview. We basically scripted all that interview, gave him the questions, and gave him some indication of what the answer to those questions would be, which he was brilliant. Like he could depart at any stage into anything he was interested in asking himself. But if somebody dried up, for example, forgot, as can happen in a studio setting, what they were going to say, he could see from the notes where he should go with this.
Yeah.
And I think that was really so ingrained with me. That's the way I always operate. So in this, even to this day, in that film, in the Dónal feature, I did, like, I filled notebooks of interviews with people before I ever got to interview them myself for the film. So I kind of knew, particularly with Dónal, because he's not a man of words, you know, he's a musician.
Yeah.
And so I had to spend a lot of time with him in the run up to that film. And so I knew when I came to do the big interviews with him where I wanted to go with it. And what he'd already said to me, I wasn't putting words in his mouth. He'd already said them, but he needed to be reminded. You know? If that is a very long-winded answer.
Oh, no, but I mean, it really speaks to, you know, building rapport with the people that you are documenting in a way. And as a kind of filmmaker, did the Emmy help you gain access? Like,
no.
Or was that like a nice thing?
No.
Like was it the thing where you're like, oh, you're now an Emmy winning, so like we'll give you an interview with things, or was it more your connections and community?
I would think if I was going looking for a job after that Emmy, you know, if I needed to go out and find a job or something, probably yes, and nowadays definitely. But we had our own company at that stage. I mean, I say our own company, there were two of us and we were waiting on commissions. Also, we'd had 3 kids in the meantime who happened to be triplets. So just at the point when I won that Emmy, I had 3 1.5-year-olds, and the last thing on my mind was kind of exploiting the Emmy for professional purposes. It was just the conjunction of time and events. So it's certainly it was a huge surprise, and it is something that helps us, you know, if you know on. When we're pitching for something, you know, it does add. But no, it didn't make everything easier. And I don't think it ever does, actually. You're only as good as the last thing you did. And sometimes people, the content might be not what they're interested in, even if you did win an Emmy for it, you know.
Yeah, as somebody who's been observing and part of the musical community for such a long time, what are the significant changes in that time? Do you know, like, what are some things? Because, you know, the change in distribution and the kind of lack of payment does seem to have taken a huge amount out of it.
Oh,
but then,
where do I begin? I mean, there's a Steenbeck machine up there, editing machine, which I could work once upon a time, not to edit, but to view material in RTE. When you ever wanted to view something from the archives, you put actual rolls of film and sound tape on a Steenbeck and viewed it in a viewing room. Like it now it seems like the dark ages, or not the dark ages, but you know, so long ago. Everything's changed. Digital culture, the whole idea of a public service broadcaster and broadcasting, deregulation happened in my time as well. So once upon a time there really only was RTE, and that's where you went to work. And that's not the situation anymore. And the whole idea of public service broadcasting has morphed into something else. And I kind of feel that Philip and I, who trained inside that organisation, brought some of the ethos of that out into our work, in that we feel that what we do is culturally important. And particularly with the film about Dónal, I wanted to be there after we're gone, and I wanted some sense of what an artist he was to be there after we're all gone, you know. So those kind of things. I think the one big thing is digital media. Yeah, that has affected both the media, the way we consume it, the way we think, the works, you know, the cliche about shortened attention spans. It's harder to get the time to do things, you know, nowadays, and I think I'm on slow time.
yeah, I suppose it gives you more time to process and understand as well, and see things in a deeper way.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely, definitely. So some people have said to me, you let the film breathe. You leave the time to think. You don't explain everything. You don't finish out everything. So there is a mania for explanation nowadays that's, I find, not necessary, really. In the end of the day, you don't have to do it. You really don't. People like to make their own, stories up within your story,
Yeah. And in terms of if you're passionate about wanting to tell a story about a subject matter, do you know instinctively this is for broadcast? This is definitely a feature film. Do you have that inkling, or is it something that you're kind of sitting on and putting into those spaces?
That's an interesting question. That's a really interesting question, because I actually did make a film for television on Dónal, 52-minute film in 2004 that I was really unhappy with. And so when this, because I thought it was too compressed, I made all the rookie mistakes. I piled up people to comment on him and his work, not necessary. All the kind of, stellar kind of things that he'd been involved in, listing off his accomplishments. You don't need to do any of that. You can allude to it. You can, the force of the artist himself will. It doesn't matter in the end of the day whether they made a record with Elvis, if they're that good, So I knew when we came back to do this film and we got a commission, I said to Dónal, this is a feature. I'm not making it for television. I need the time. I need the 90 minutes. Your life has been long. Your accomplishments are considerable. Your artistic process is hugely interesting. And this is what we must do. So yes, yeah. There are times when nothing will do but a feature.
And what would be your approach then to telling that story, or would it change? Do you have more resources, less resources? Does how it's going to be seen affect what you're filming?
Yeah, you would generally have more resources because the budget for a feature will, by definition, be bigger than a television budget for the same documentary, depending. So, in a way, that is more challenging, because it's kind of hard to imagine a 90-minute thing. I find it hard, maybe just because the way I work. So I'm not that linear. So I don't break it down. And in this particular documentary, Dónal got very sick halfway through, so we had to stop, change the whole program around, schedule, people. He wasn't available then to play with certain people. So in a way, the fact that it was a bit loose anyway made me not too scared of having to do that, It's just the way I approach things. I think if I had it out all on an Excel spreadsheet, frame by frame, I would have absolutely freaked out,
And so this was Screen Ireland supported.
Yeah.
Does, again, which funder you're going to maybe change how you tailor your pitch? Do you think different people are looking for different things, or would you go to the funder maybe that might do the best for the project?
Well, Screen Ireland is always first port of call for a feature. It has to be. And often if you're going somewhere else, they will say, have you applied to Screen Ireland? And if you say, you have, and they've rejected it, or you haven't, they'll say, well, why are you coming here then? Because that's not the way to do it.
Yeah.
However, it is Screen Ireland, by and large, they like their commissions to have legs, to travel outside of Ireland. That can be stressful because we're committed to making, first and foremost, Dónal Lunny is, in my case, in this film, an Irish artist. We make no apologies for him being, one of the best, most amazing artists to come out of this country in this century. Yeah. So, and then that people should be interested in that outside of the country, as they would be in any artist. So we just have to. But in fact, Screen Ireland were fine. Yeah, they were fine with that. They accepted that, and then for Comisiún na Man, which is the second and most important funder, they were bought in as well. So that wasn't an issue because their remit is to Ireland. And then the third and very important supporter for this was UCD, Creative Futures Academy. And PJ Matthews, the director there, he supported it because he's just very open-minded. And Dónal was an artist in residence there. And so he supported the film as well. And then we had the 481 and all of that. It was kind of quite tidy in the end. There were no outside the country funders to be accommodated.
And you say it has travelled. It certainly has travelled. So we're here in Washington, and you know you're on kind of the closing legs of a very long tour. Sharing with audiences.
It's going to have another. It has a showing in Omaha. I won't be getting there. Sometime in April, New York in May, and then we're back in London in April, and there are. Oh yeah, it's showing in Notre Dame as well, this next month I think. So yeah, we're doing a nice little tour with it, and then there's a couple of European ones that will come up later. You know, Paris maybe, and maybe Germany. We'll see.
And has any audience reactions or responses from people who've seen the film? Did any of them surprise you at all?
They were. I was surprised not by their reaction as such, but the depth of it, the feeling that it kind of aroused in people. You know, that they really responded at a very deep level, and they were very moved, and that a lot of them were fans of Bothy Band, Planksty, Moving Hearts, or whatever, and so everything in the film was kind of bringing them back to some time in their own lives, and that's a very emotive kind of connection for an audience. So I was surprised actually at how many men were there in that number, you know, and that was very moving actually.
And if you had a blank check in terms of, the stories that you'd like to tell, or, the people that you'd like to follow, is there anything that you'd, the kind of dream project?
Well, actually Dónal was the dream project.
Lovely.
Which came, which was just wonderful to do. And then I followed that up. I made a film with another artist called Pauline Scanlon, just for television, in fact. But I was very happy with the way that turned out as well. So I think this is my area, is kind of artists that interest me. They're all musicians, and something about the process and a connection to Irish culture and language and place, and that's what resonates with me, So they're all my dream projects. I have many dream projects,
And are you allowed to mention the thing that you said before? Or is that secret?
I have two, but I don't want to hex
them.
No.
But
they're both involved. Like one involves two musicians who are women, and the other one is a much more generic kind of social history, cultural history of song. That's all I'll say about that. Yeah.
We'll watch with bated breath. And now is the time to celebrate this film with audiences as well. And I think showing the impressive work of an artist and how it kind of resonates on such a strong level when something is so powerful to people. And you're the artist documenting the artist.
Yeah, that can be. I mean, I know Dónal so long, so I hope I didn't, veer into just, this is my friend and he's wonderful, and you just can't do that, So I had to sort of step back a good bit, and the fact that he got sick actually made it, in a one way, you just have to do the bloody work and forget about feelings, and just you know what to do it, and then follow the material, do it justice, represent him as well as you can. So those kind of things, if you keep them in your head, rather than just,
And in terms as well of, you're someone who's so ingrained in the music industry and musicians and what's happening. The fact that distribution has changed so much, the fact that how artists are made famous and stay famous. Can you see, the future Dónals coming down the line? Do you think, is it tentative because of that changing nature of people not buying albums?
I never see myself as being in the music industry. I mean, Philip often says that we're a not for loss company. I see myself in music culture. I've always seen it came in that way and it'll go out that way, and I'm not virtue signaling. I don't think that's just the way it is. Future Dónals, yeah, they're out there, but sometimes there's a kind of cultural history aspect to this, which is that they all arrived on a scene that didn't exist. They made it up, it became very popular, it went out of the country, and then so that was a very exciting time to be alive. And I think it's kind of the wheel is turning, and that with bands like Lancome, Vagabonds, John Francis Flynn, all those young musicians and players who are coming back into the culture in a very dynamic way, like they're politically motivated, they're culturally very, very aware of what they're doing, and all of those things were true in the 60s and 70s, and they're back again. Nobody's just in it for opportunism or for a record deal. I mean, they'd want to have their head examined anyway if they thought that was going to, with Spotify and all of those kind of streaming platforms and so on. That's not the way to make a future for yourself. But I don't think that is actually a concern of people who are true artists anyway, if that doesn't sound too, woo.
Yeah.
But, I think they'll do it anyway,
Yeah.
And the thing is, in traditional music, there are some amazing traditional musicians, and they have never been what we would call, they've never made their living from traditional music. They're everywhere, they're computer programmers and they're engineers and doctors, and they're fabulous musicians, and they play at all the festivals and sessions, and everybody knows their name, and they may have made records, but they're not actually making their money from it.
Yeah.
And but it is their life.
Yeah.
It is actually their life,
That's the vocation. But thank you so much, and may you document many more. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma.
Cheers.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for listening, and make sure to subscribe to Film Ireland wherever you get your podcasts.